The most exciting one I've had was a cold spot. I was telling you about it was like about maybe a 10-foot radius where the temperature went from 45 degrees to 14 degrees right in the middle of it.
Since the dawn of civilization, mankind has had a fascination with the unexplained. This boundless and peculiar curiosity is fueled by not only a vast history of mysterious and seemingly unexplainable events, but by our own incessant need to discover the limits of our own mortality. The question of life after death is as old as life itself. It's the very foundation of all the world's religions, and its answer, if ever discovered, would universally change the lives of every man, woman, and child, and forever alter the direction of scientific and religious pursuits. But how can such a question ever be answered? What means do we have to search for a world that is beyond our reach and years? And where should we begin? The answer may be right inside your very home. Mysterious voices, strange lights and apparitions, a feeling of foreboding, cold spots, slamming doors and moving objects are just some of the claims made by thousands of people each year, claims which are typically dismissed by local authorities and hardline skeptics as a hoax or the product of an overactive imagination. But these widespread claims of paranormal activity have been shared by not only the general population, but by some of the most prominent, trusted, and well-respected figures in our history. With over $500 million spent each year on paranormal-based horror films, it's difficult to dispute the effect this once forbidden subject has had on an increasingly curious population. In today's world, however, the public image of paranormal activity is usually tainted by the often unrealistic approach of the film and television industries.
My views on watching a lot of the movies, we know in Hollywood they have to do their hype. We do know that. But there's many movies that I've watched over the years and sat back and I watch some of the things they talk about, some of the scenarios they recreate. And I can look at that and just sit back and go, they did their homework and they did check into some of these things. I mean, is there always going to be Hollywood hype? Yeah. Do I understand why? Yeah. People love to be scared.
In spite of the growing popularity, the consensus is not entirely favorable. There are those who would argue that Hollywood's unrealistic portrayal of paranormal phenomenon has cast an unflattering shadow of unbelievability on the entire subject, causing the public to relate paranormal activity more to science fiction than actual fact.
Reality is you go into a supposed haunted location, you set up your equipment, and you sit somewhere for hours in the dark, and usually nothing really happens while you're there.
We love that feeling of sitting on the edge of your seat and waiting for that big confrontation scene at the end of the movie. Well, if they made a movie based on true reality, people would be asking for their money back, because 2 hours of footsteps, knocks, moving of keys, and nothing else would bore people to tears.
I think most Hollywood movies that deal with paranormal start off with a grain of truth or a good idea, but then they have to Hollywoodize it and make it sensational. Most ghost hunts and research isn't sensational at all. It's a lot of boring, time-consuming work. But in order to have a Hollywood movie, you have to make things appear that aren't necessarily there.
Sensationalism within the film and television industry can create great uncertainty among the viewing audience. Much of the fear surrounding paranormal activity stems from Hollywood's exaggerated perspective of factual events.
Aren't they going to kill any of us?
Don't ask it when. I don't want to know.
I think it really creates a lot of fear. I mean, I admit I was very scared of ghosts for many, many years, until once I experienced it and I started reading on it, and I realized there really wasn't a lot to fear. If you learned more about it, you'd be a lot safer. And I think that the movie industry wants people to be scared of these things, instead of looking for help and wanting to be able to coexist peacefully. Like they said, to sell a movie, they have to bring the fear up. But I think it just makes our job harder to discourage the fear.
Regardless of the Hollywood and media viewpoints, paranormal activity is a very common and respected subject throughout our history. Although not widely popularized, there are many prominent historical figures who, by their own admission, not only experienced paranormal activity, but actually sought out encounters with the spirit world. But where did it all begin? How long has the world been experiencing this unusual phenomenon? And what sources are there to shed light on the history and creation of these perplexing claims? It's possible a significant piece of the puzzle might just be found here. Unearthed during an archaeological expedition in the summer of 1839, these historic tablets portray a tale that is not only the earliest paranormal reference on record, but also the oldest story ever written. A story known as the Epic of Gilgamesh.
The Epic of Gilgamesh is a very significant story in terms of paranormal history, not only because it gives us clues as to the human condition of the day, but it also shows us that thoughts of existence from beyond the grave were not uncommon. They were a significant part of people's everyday lives, and they were taken very seriously.
The tablets tell the tale of the warrior king Gilgamesh and his unyielding quest for not only supreme control over his kingdom, but also for the secret of immortality.
During the course of his reign over the city of Erech, Gilgamesh befriended Enkidu, a man who, for all intents and purposes, was Gilgamesh's physical equal in terms of strength and fighting ability. This made a huge impression on Gilgamesh, and rather than try to destroy him, he thought it wiser to befriend him and join forces.
The partnership was successful, and the warrior team became quite famous for their unstoppable success in battle. It was after one such battle, however, that Gilgamesh's true quest would be realized.
Now, directly following a horrific battle, Enkidu falls ill and eventually dies, and this had a devastating effect on Gilgamesh, not only because he lost his dearest friend, but because it brought him face to face with the fact that he wasn't indestructible. This terrified him, and he fell into an all-encompassing quest to find out if there was a new world after death to conquer.
That quest was soon fulfilled. After many weeks of searching for answers among the seers and prophets of the time, Gilgamesh had an encounter that would rest his mind at ease.
Now, I don't know if the gods took pity on him or not, but Enkidu appeared to Gilgamesh and told him all about the secrets of the underworld, what to expect after dying, everything that Gilgamesh wanted to know. Now, of course, even if this tale were based on factual events, which could have been, the encounter that Gilgamesh had with Enkidu likely would have been strictly psychological. Meaning, here you have a man in Gilgamesh who is distraught, emotionally overwrought, desperate to find the answers to his questions. So it would have been more than likely that he would have made up the whole encounter with Enkidu. He would have probably imagined their whole conversation. But regardless, the story shows us that encounters like this, or at the very least tales of encounters like this, were documented to have happened over 5,000 years ago.
Although the Epic of Gilgamesh provides some clues, the nature and progression of when true ghost stories originated is still unknown. What is known is that the interest and popularity has clearly manifested within individuals for centuries. And to this day, word of mouth continues to be the proven catalyst in which these stories are passed down and urbanized. Stories, legends, and accounts of unexplained phenomena continue in modern day and will as long as the quest for an understanding of mortality is craved by the human mind. However, there is one historic account which has left an impact so powerful as to have lasted more than 3,000 years and shaped the popular conception of ghosts all the way into the mid-20th century. The story of Stoic Greek philosopher Athenodorus.
Athenodorus Canonides was a really interesting guy. Not only was he a widely revered philosopher and student of Poseidonus of Rhodes, who was probably the greatest polymath of the day, but he was also the teacher of Octavian, who later would go on to be known as Caesar Augustus.
But in addition to his teachings, Athenodorus was also known for something more: his encounter with a ghost. A tale that was later documented by the Roman lawyer Pliny the Younger in a letter to his patron Lucius Sura.
As the story goes, there was an old house for rent in Athens that was infamous not only for causing disease and sickness, but also for being haunted. So haunted, in fact, that skeptics that went to the house to observe it, to try to disprove the rumors, often came away petrified of what they saw.
It wasn't long before Athenodorus would discover the spirit everyone was talking about. On his first night in the house, while writing, the faint sounds of rattling chains and the startling apparition of an old man caught the philosopher's attention. After trying to ignore the spirit with no avail, he decided to follow him with the hope of putting an end to the disturbances once and for all.
Athenodorus follows it out to the garden, where it points to the ground and then disappears. So the next day, Athenodorus gets permission from the town magistrate to dig at the spot where the apparition pointed. He digs it up, and he finds a skeleton wrapped in chains.
The belief in afterlife existence has not only been one of the primary influential factors in the cultural shaping of our history as humans, it's also the fundamental basis of every one of the 19 major world religions. However, in spite of the obvious influence the paranormal has had on religion, a 2005 Harris poll revealed that while 82% of U.S. adults believe in God, only 40% believe in ghosts. A figure which some find to be absurdly contradicting.
Really doesn't make sense, because in order to believe in God, you have to have faith, which is belief in something you cannot see or prove. But we do have a lot more people drilling God into our psyche than we do drilling ghosts into our psyche.
The belief in God in itself assumes a belief in some sort of a spirit or a soul. Most people who believe in God, believe in a heaven, believes that your soul moves on to somewhere after you pass. So the fact that people can believe that and not believe that your spirit can, for whatever reason, decide to stay, be stuck here, and want to communicate with you, it absolutely blows my mind.
People view things where they need this within their life. That's our powerful force that helps to guide us. Might be viewed differently, but people reach out to that and they hold on to that. A lot of people have difficulty trying to understand, are there ghosts? Are there spirits that are lingering on this plane? Why is that happening? That's a hard concept to understand if you've never experienced anything.
I do believe religion still plays a large role in paranormal investigation. A lot of teams do use exorcisms, and they use blessings, and they often encourage their clients to pray. They will bring the clergy in to offer counseling and even spirit removal. I think that can be important. I believe that it can work, and maybe in some cases it doesn't work.
Still, the occurrence of paranormal activity in the religious doctrine is undeniable. Each chapter in many of the religious scriptures clearly detail what can only be described as a paranormal experience.
Regardless of your religion, it's difficult to find any written reference in any religious doctrine that doesn't specifically describe or base its point on the belief of contact with a spirit or an afterlife existence. The bottom line is that there is incredible similarities in the stories, and yet no one on either side is willing to step forward and make a connection.
Still, the popularity of belief in a Holy Spirit far outweighs the general belief in ghosts. The unusual balance of opinion can quite possibly be attributed to the very effect of religion itself.
You have to understand that most religions throughout history, especially the Christian religions, strictly forbade the attempted communication or interaction with any spirit that isn't holy. In the Middle Ages, you would have been hung, beaten, or shunned for even claiming to have seen a ghost, let alone hunting one. So as you can imagine, it really wasn't a subject that was open for discussion. And as a result, anyone having a paranormal experience has had two choices. You either say nothing, or you give the story the appearance of a divine intervention or religious experience. And this explains why so many stories during the Middle Ages were more religious than traditionally paranormal.
In 1487, two members of the Catholic Dominican order published one of the most famous medieval treatises in history, and in doing so, thwarted the investigation of paranormal phenomenon for nearly 400 years. The treatise was titled the Malleus Maleficarum, or the Hammer of the Witches. And although the document was specifically aimed at witchcraft and not spirit hunting, the distinction between the two was not typically recognized.
The purpose of the Malleus Maleficarum was essentially to refute any and all arguments against the reality of witchcraft. The church at the time wanted the people to believe wholeheartedly that there were these evil creatures on the loose that would talk to Satan and steal your children, and that they were alive and present in society, and that they were a danger to everyone.
In addition to the propaganda, the Malleus Maleficarum was also used as a training tool for the town magistrates and contained detailed instructions on how to capture, convict, and kill anyone suspected of being a witch.
Now, obviously, this treaty had an effect on the people at the time. It affected the way they lived, the way they worked, the way they functioned on a daily basis, and it's not really hard to see the effect this would have had on the reporting or investigation of paranormal experiences during the time period. If you had experiences, if you saw a ghost or heard voices or footsteps or experienced anything unusual of any kind, you couldn't tell anybody. And for almost 400 years, anything paranormal would have had to have been hidden or lied about in order to avoid persecution.
But all of that changed in late March of 1848, when the unusual experiences of the two sisters would alter the public perception of communication with the dead for nearly 100 years. Catherine and Margaret Fox lived here in this small cottage with their parents and sister Lee in Hydesville, a small village east of Rochester, New York.
The Fox family started out as really kind of a quiet, unassuming, and relatively normal family. They were originally from Canada, and they moved down to New York State with the hopes of starting a new kind of life for themselves. But unfortunately, the house they moved into had a questionable reputation of being haunted.
It was at the end of a long winter and only weeks after moving in when strange manifestations began to occur in the Foxes' home. Strange taps and rapping noises began to keep the family awake at night, events which were all too familiar to the cottage's former owner, Michael Weekman.
The Michael Weekman family, who owned the house in Hydesville prior to the Fox family, claimed to have experiences while living there too, and just like the Foxes, they claimed to have been woken up at night by loud rapping noises, and they felt cold spots throughout the house, and they even claimed to have been touched by an unseen presence. And these experiences were just too terrifying and too much for the Weekman's youngest daughter to handle, so they were eventually forced to move.
On the night of March 31st, 1848, the disturbances reached their peak. The family, scared and unable to sleep, searched the home relentlessly for the source of the noises.
The children in the other room heard the rapping and tried to make similar sounds by snapping their fingers. My youngest child, Kathy, said, "Mr. Splitfoot, do as I do," clapping her hands. The sound imitated, following her with the same number of raps. When she stopped, the sound ceased for a short time. Then Margaretta said in sport, "Now do just as I do. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, striking one hand against the other at the same time, and the raps came as before. She then said, "Oh, look, Mother, it can see as well as hear."
The intelligent responses of the entity prompted the Foxes to develop an audible code of communication, 1 rap for yes and 2 raps for no. It was these amazing events and their continued ability to allegedly communicate with the dead that not only lifted the Fox sisters the height of popularity and controversy, but also brought along the advent of modern spiritualism.
They brought spiritualism to this part of the world. Spiritualism was alive and well in other parts of the world. They just seem to bring it to life here. There have been times when they have supposedly been proven to be frauds, but whether they were frauds or not doesn't change the fact that they did get people thinking about things and how they work. Not just the fact that they're there, but why are they there? How are they there? What are the mechanics behind it? And that's what started the whole spiritualist movement as a religion.
In the few years following the Hydesville incident, a lot of things started happening. I mean, you had mediums that were popping up out of nowhere. Spiritualism became a religion, and seances actually became a high society function. And all of these things were changing the views and beliefs that the country had embraced for hundreds of years. It was a really significant turning point in our culture. And there were the Fox sisters right on top of it all, leading the way.
But the growing strength of spiritualism was not without limit. By 1885, the popularity of spiritualist belief was on the decline. Widespread claims of fraud caused a notable decrease in the spiritualist population and serious doubt in the minds of skeptics.
The spiritualists were losing the battle with the skeptics, and that was primarily due to the tremendous amount of fraud that was popping up all over the world. It was almost like an epidemic.
It was actually around the turn of the century that so much fraud came out. And I think that's what turned a lot of people away. People could start to realize that they can double expose their film and make it look like a ghost, and maybe at first it was accidental, but then they realized they could do it on purpose and scam people. And I think just the amount of fraud that was around at that particular time is what turned people away from it and really made it fade out for decades.
You know, back in the day, they would put on a big song and dance, and there's even reports of some of the most famous mediums. Back when spiritual, investigating and spiritual era really opened up, where they were actually swallowing cheesecloth and then regurgitating it at their high point of the seance, and calling it ectoplasm, and all these things kind of added to the crash of mediums.
In the late winter of 1847, a young spiritualist couple from the small town of Vienna, Canada, gave birth to one of the most influential minds of the 20th century, Thomas Alva Edison. In the early 20th century, spiritualism was in full swing and quickly nearing the height of popularity among the middle class and blue blood socialites. Having been raised in a spiritualist family and admittedly progressing in years, Edison's thoughts began to focus a bit less on the physical and more on the boundaries of mortality, an interest which was echoed in 1916 when Edison's friend and famed British physicist Sir William Crookes began experimenting with an increasingly popular pastime, spirit photography.
Sir William claimed to have been able to capture a human spirit on film, and although this was really somewhat of a controversial thing at the time, it was enough to pique the interest of a lot of his scientific colleagues, and not the very least of which was his good friend Thomas Edison.
Inspired by the British inventor and following Crookes' death in late 1919, Edison allegedly began development on what could only be described as an apparatus for communicating with the dead, or ghost phone as it was often called, a project which was described in the October 1920 issue of American Magazine.
The article was called "Edison Working to Communicate with the Next World." It was an astounding endeavor of the time, and it was very mysterious, and only a handful of people knew anything about it at all. But because of Edison's reputation and his successes, there was a general confidence that if anybody could make a machine like this, it was Edison.
Although there was much speculation surrounding the matter, it was Edison's belief that if an afterlife intelligence could be captured on film, then it was quite possible that his ghost phone might actually work.
If our personality survives, then it is strictly logical and scientific to assume that it retains memory, intellect, and other faculties, such as knowledge that we acquire on this earth. Therefore, if we can evolve an instrument so delicate as to be affected by our personality as it survives in the next life, such an instrument, when made available, ought to record something.
In the early morning hours of October 18th, 1931, Thomas Edison died, possibly taking with him the secrets of what might have been the most astounding invention in history, and leaving behind the continuing question of life after death. In 1941, 10 years after his death, Edison allegedly made contact at a seance in New York conducted by Scottish engineer and inventor of the television, John Logie Baird. According to first-hand accounts, Edison revealed to Baird that the plans for his ghost phone were left in the possession of 3 of his former assistants, and that the machine itself was built but never worked. Neither the machine nor the plans were ever found, making his ghost phone one of the greatest mysteries of the spiritual and scientific world.
Harry Price was not only an engineer and a writer and photographer, he was also probably the most controversial ghost hunter of the 20th century. And when he was 8 years old, he witnessed a stage performance by a magician and potion seller known as the Great Sequoia. And it was this performance that sparked his interest in unexplainable things and really shaped the work he would do later in life.
By the age of 15, Price had his first of what would be many encounters with the paranormal when he and a friend decided to investigate the rumors surrounding a local manor house in Shropshire County.
After hearing the rumors about this alleged haunted house and being the inquisitive person he was, he just wanted to find out if they were true. So like any curious teenager would do, he and his friend locked themselves in this house overnight to see if anything would happen. And they didn't see anything in particular, but during the night they heard noises coming from the upstairs room and what sounded like footsteps descending the stairs.
In an effort to capture the entity on film and prove the haunting, the pair set up a powder flash camera at the base of the staircase and waited for the sounds to reoccur.
Well, he waited for about an hour, and the footsteps eventually returned. And he flashed the camera and got the plate developed the next morning. And although the picture showed nothing but an empty staircase, the investigation was a very significant breakthrough to Price because that was the day that he considered to be his very first actual experience with a ghost.
Although he was unable to capture evidence of a haunting scientifically, the experience alone fueled his interest to continue his research and develop better and more efficient scientific methods of collecting and documenting evidence.
Harry was always looking for new experiences and different research subjects, and he was always experimenting with different paranormal phenomena, and the public opinion of what he was doing was usually skeptical at best, but it really didn't matter to him. He was determined to find the truth, even if it meant discrediting a lot of the mediums and witnesses he worked with over the years, which unfortunately was just about everybody.
In the summer of 1923, while on a train from London to his home in Pulborough, England, the investigator's luck would change when he met a 22-year-old medium named Dorothy Stella Cranshaw, who openly told Price about the paranormal experiences she had been having.
She was experiencing all sorts of strange phenomena, from rapping noises and chills to objects flying around the room, and she told him all these things were driving her crazy. Now, to Price, the description she gave of her disturbances didn't really sound like a haunting to him. To him, it appeared as though this girl had some kind of mediumistic abilities and was causing these incidents herself. And this excited him because he finally found what he hoped would be an authentic medium test subject.
The experiments conducted with Cranshaw over the next few years yielded a variety of results, which in 1926 were documented in a journal Price had written entitled Scientific Experiences with a New Medium.
More than a dozen seances were conducted by Price and Cranshaw in 1923, and in front of witnesses at one sitting alone, Cranshaw produced all kinds of phenomena, including levitating and collapsing a table, moving objects around the room, and Price kept detailed records of these things in his journals, and he made note of not only the ambient effects such as temperature fluctuations, but also that Stella was capable of manipulating the telekinetoscope that he made to test her abilities.
For years to come, Price's reputation would have to hold firm to the notion that through his work he would someday be revered as a pioneer of paranormal research. Although a good deal of Price's time was spent exposing and debunking frauds, colleagues and members of the Society for Psychical Research in England tried their best to discredit and tarnish his reputation. The American branch of the Society, however, held their own opinions.
As you can imagine, a man who made a career out of discounting and debunking the abilities of alleged mediums would without a doubt over time become a very unpopular person in the world of mediums. But Harry Price was never out to win friends or the popular vote. He was looking for the truth so he could study it and test it and document it. And exposing some of these psychics as frauds really just cleared the playing field and helped make his job a little bit easier in finding authentic abilities to study.
In 1928, acting on an invitation from a local newspaper, Price became involved in a case that would sustain the efforts of his life's work for years to come: the Borley Rectory in Essex.
Price had a great interest in the Borley Rectory, mainly because it was considered to be one of, if not the most haunted locations in all of England. And he eventually leased the house from the owners in order to conduct a round-the-clock investigation, which actually, all in all, lasted about 4 years.
He placed an ad in the newspaper and invited open-minded investigators, mainly students from the local college, to stay in the house and document any phenomena that might occur. To help them, he created a handbook which detailed the proper methods and techniques for conducting and documenting a paranormal investigation. This was the first book of its kind, and many of the methods he developed are still in use today.
From beginning to end, there were over 40 investigators working with Price on that investigation, and there were a lot of paranormal accounts collected, from hearing bells and rapping noises to mysterious writings and messages, and all of these things were documented. And the methods he used to gather this evidence and run his investigation essentially established a blueprint that paranormal investigators would be able to use for years to come.
Despite the controversy surrounding his work, and regardless of what his former colleagues would claim even after his death in 1948, Price left his mark on the paranormal world.
Whether they realize it or not, his work is emulated by investigators worldwide every day. And he was probably the biggest influence the field of paranormal investigation ever had.
35 years ago, when we got involved with this work, we had very basic tools. We had our little cassette players and 35mm cameras. But one of our key and essential tools was bringing somebody in that was gifted, psychic, or a medium.
Well, the difference between being a psychic and being a medium, psychic ability is the ability to tune into a living person, an object, a place, and to get impressions and images from that. Being a medium is using that same psychic ability to communicate with those who have apparently passed before us. So in other words, you can be a psychic and only a psychic. But in order to be a medium, you do have to be a psychic first. It's like you have to walk before you can run.
Psychic or medium, it's difficult to dispute that both possess an inconceivable ability that tends to draw the often unwelcome attention and criticism of skeptical minds. As humans, we find it in our nature to challenge the unknown and criticize the things we often don't understand. Psychic ability is certainly no exception. However, regardless of what true abilities these individuals may possess, the burden of proof is theirs to bear.
Go either way. There are a lot of mediums out there who claim to be able to contact the dead and speak with the dead, and a lot of them do it just because of the money-making aspect they can get out of it. But I'm sure within the world that we live in, there has to be someone out there who has some special talents that can pick up and communicate with the dead.
Communication with those who have experienced life after death is a fact, and it's as easy to believe in that for me as it is to believe in trees. Unfortunately, I can take you outside and show you the trees. I can't show you the spirits. It's a personal experience.
Psychic ability has been the foundation of paranormal research and spirit hunting for hundreds of centuries. It's been both the subject of praise and the primary symptom of humiliation. But in spite of the vast cases of fraud unveiled throughout the turn of the 20th century, or the ever-entangled controversy surrounding the validity of mediums, they are still a widely used resource in modern paranormal investigation, and often bring to the table a varying range of unique abilities. Some possess the ability of clairvoyance or precognition, which is the perception of events that have or might occur. Others possess the power of psychometry, which is the ability to obtain information through touch. Although they differ in their application, both have been considered a valuable asset to the research and validation of evidence.
We actually have people in our group who are mediums. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. People in our group have a lot of different abilities, just from feelings to being able to see spirits. And having all of those different abilities being part of the group gives a whole lot of validation to what we do when we give that information to a client. When you can get somebody who can see a spirit and have somebody else who can just sense it at different times but come up with the same thing, that's very validating when you hand that over. So all these different abilities, mediums or whatever level of sensitivity, is very important when you're doing an investigation.
Equally important is the group's ability to document their findings and capture evidence in such a way as to present it to a growing skeptical society, something mediums have yet to accomplish and the science-minded have yet to support.
You know, we're no better than the psychic or the mediumistic investigating. We just offer hard evidence to people, evidence that's hard to take for skeptics, evidence that they you know, may think is actually paranormal phenomena, and that's hard to do when you're just dealing with opinion and a theory and no actual science behind it.
As a medium, the evidence that I collect is usually in my head. I don't have any equipment or anything like that, so capturing it wouldn't really be the right way of putting it. How often do I experience evidence? I can pretty much go into a house that's never had any history of paranormal activity, and I would still pick up on the spirit world as a constant, and it's all around us. I was feeling like there were two people standing by the window. It felt like a mother and a little girl, and they were looking out the window. It felt like they may have been talking to somebody out that window on the right side. Well, as I remember it, I don't literally see what I'm picking up on. I mean, I'm not seeing it with my eyes. It's being impressed upon my mind. The easiest way to explain it is it's very, very subtle. It's almost as if I remember what someone looks like when I'm saying that I see someone. It's that subtle. And it does take a while to figure out what's me and what's not. But I've gotten to the point where I'm able to do that. And I did perceive of a child. When I say a child, I want to say 6 to 8 years old, a little girl. She was standing right inside this door, about 4 feet inside this door.
When you guys first opened the door?
No, I was sitting in there by myself, and Karen was coming around. When I heard Karen, I turned to look at her, and the little girl was standing there. I feel like she came out of the closet. I didn't see her come out of the closet, but it felt like that's where she came from.
That's kind of where we were getting the reading, too. It was right about that.
She's only about this big.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go into detail and describe everything about what she was wearing and so forth, too. And it's all what I need to know. She's not going to tell me something I don't need to know. But I did pick up on a small girl with a kitten. I did not get the girl's name, but she did give me the kitten's name as Charlie. And she does seem to hide in the closet of the room that we were in with the kitten. I had a feeling that she wasn't supposed to have the kitten in the house, and that's why she was hiding.
When it comes to paranormal investigating, there's really two types of investigating that researchers do. There's scientific investigating and there's psychic or mediumistic investigating. And I don't think one or the other is necessarily better. I just have a problem with mediums and psychics putting forth their opinion as fact.
If we're dealing with somebody who says they see a spirit across the room and you're checking, there's temperature drops, they're picking something up on the infrared, and if they can document that scientifically, that proves that what this person is picking up on is something that's accurate.
The biggest message with what I do is that I am not gifted or better or different than anyone else, and anyone can do this if they simply just take the time to develop it. The way I explain it to people is that the spirit world is a constant. It's as if it's raining outside all the time. You can't make it rain. You can't stop it from raining. You can't make it rain harder or softer. But it's up to you whether you want to stick your head out the window and get wet. It's going to be there, whether you're there or not.
Spirit communication is not limited to those with psychic abilities. Specific devices have been used throughout the years which are said to allow anyone to communicate with the spirit world. One particular form of communication, known as pendulum dowsing, originated in Egypt over 4,000 years ago when it was used as a means of spiritual healing. But over the years, the primary function and general technique has varied, and in the field of modern psychical research, dowsing is used not only to locate spirits, but to communicate with them.
Stop it. Are you guys familiar with dowsing? Crystal pendulum dowsing?
In a typical dowsing session, the user determines which pendulum motions will indicate a yes or no response, and then holds the pendulum steady while asking specific questions.
Are your mom and dad in this house with you? No. Do you miss your mom and dad?
It's believed that the spirits either manipulate the pendulum or the person using it to communicate their answer. Although this type of communication has been subject to many debates throughout the years, the general principle behind it is one that has been applied to a variety of devices. One in particular, the Ouija board. Much like the pendulum, the Ouija board is typically used by those seeking to foretell the future or discover occult knowledge through paranormal or supernatural means. Some believe this mystical tool originated in China over 3,000 years ago. Others claim the device has a primarily Greek history and was first used in the year 540 BC. However, the first undisputed use of these talking boards came about with the birth of the modern spiritualist movement in the late 19th century, when three business partners, E.C. Reich, Elijah Bond, and Charles Kennard, formed the Kennard Novelty Company and created an all-new alphanumeric version of the original talking tablets used for centuries. The new design featured the alphabet scribed in arcs across the middle of the board, along with the numbers 1 through 10. The keywords yes and no and goodbye were also added. In place of the original planchette was a four-legged paddle-shaped pointing device, which would allegedly allow the spirits or its users to spell out responses rather than writing them. Kennard called the new device Ouija, after what he claimed was the Egyptian word for good luck, and sold the board as a parlor game. However, the ventures of the Kennard Novelty Company were short-lived. In 1892, in the face of financial ruin, Kennard lost his company to one of his former employees, William Fold.
One of Fold's first public relation gimmicks as master of his new company was to reinvent the history of the Ouija board. He said that he himself had invented the board, and the name Ouija was in fact a fusion of the French word oui for yes and the German ja for yes. But it's much more likely that the name came from the Moroccan city of Oujda. Middle Eastern cities were in fact very popular during the late 19th century.
During a Ouija session, users sit with their fingers placed lightly on the edge of the planchette or pointing device in the center of the board, and questions are then asked aloud.
Okay, now somebody ask a question. Oh, by the way, if you ask a silly question, it won't answer.
According to those involved, any willing spirit present at the time spells out their responses by moving the planchette over the appropriate letter. Of course, this phenomenon has yet to be proven scientifically, and many skeptics doubt the board has any spiritual significance at all.
The Ouija board is really just a pressed cardboard. It has no, no connection to the spiritual world.
I don't see them as the evil things that some people do. That, oh boy, if you ever touch one, you're going to be haunted for the rest of your life. It's probably a tool just like a pendulum and crystal ball and so forth that some people can use to help them focus. I don't think there's anything supernatural about it.
Many skeptics of the board attribute the movement of the planchette to dishonesty or the unnoticeable reactions of those touching the pointer. But what of the claims of paranormal activity said to manifest during a Ouija board session?
We believe it's the act of what you're doing that kind of promotes and works as a catalyst for paranormal activity. You're sitting there and you're trying to communicate, and perhaps these things are seeing you do that, and they're going to come out and you're going to get good and bad with that.
Although it's true the Ouija board has a history considered by most to be nothing more than a novelty, there are still many who to this day regard it as a mystical portal to another world or a spiritual antenna set to facilitate contact with all types of paranormal entities, ranging from friendly souls to ill-intended demons.
Well, a Ouija board, I would say we have a little saying about the Ouija board. If you put hinges in the knob in it, we could use it as the door to hell. A Ouija board is like literally leaving your door open. If you don't know what you're doing, anyone can come in. And it's like attracts like in spiritualism. And if you get a bunch of drunk people together with a Ouija board, they're not going to bring through Mother Teresa. They're going to bring through someone at a very low level who may want to scare them and may even want to hurt them. So I would never, under any circumstances, condone the use of a Ouija board.
Well, to us, Ouijas or witch boards are a tool that you never use on a site. Because if it's already active and you're opening a doorway, you're only going to make it more active by opening a doorway for other things to get through. You could become possessed. You could lose yourself. That's a bad thing.
Regardless of the differences of opinion surrounding the use of Ouija boards, one question still remains. Are they indeed capable of producing or facilitating the production of paranormal activity? In the hopes of finding an answer, the New Gravity Media team decided to put this ancient oracle to the test.
Well, what we wanted to do is we wanted to bring together not only mediums, but individuals who claim to have experience producing activity with a Ouija board. And fortunately, through the help of Jim Bucknam, a medium for Boston Paranormal, we were able to find a few people that fit that description.
The team enlisted the help of Barbara Safransky, a medium and curator of a small shop in Salem, Massachusetts called Angelica of the Angels. The session was held in the home of Tom Elliott, also a member of the Boston Paranormal Group.
Well, we set up the equipment. We had 2 cameras on tripods and 1 roaming, and we placed a microphone over the table and miscellaneous meters around the room. We put a EMF meter on the table and a thermometer and humidity sensor on the mic stand and a Geiger counter to keep tabs on the background radiation level.
With all of the equipment in place, the session began. Both Barbara and Holly sat at the table and centered themselves spiritually before starting.
Ready?
Well, at first it started out relatively slow. The pointer was moving and it was selecting a few letters here and there, but it wasn't really spelling out whole words.
C. A.
And from time to time, the pointer would slide right off the board onto the table.
To compensate for the lack of specific responses from the board, Barbara began to interpret the movements of the pointer psychically.
Yes.
She wasn't getting much in the way of understandable responses with the board, so she started to interpret what was happening on her own.
Have you left us? I had a Frank and a William that came in. I feel that this is definitely a male entity that's trying to communicate.
It was right about this time that the pointer started moving off the board regularly. And it was moving around in circles on the table. So eventually they just took the board off the table altogether and let the pointer just run haywire.
It was during this display that something unusual began to happen to one of the people in the room.
There were 2 stationary cameras and 1 floater. I had the right side near the front door and Joanne had the left near the kitchen. I was doing a close-up of the Ouija board and the tri-field meter, and that's when I heard a thud behind me, kind of like someone was being slammed into a door or something. I turned around and Jim was up against the door, and by the looks of him, he seemed like he was in some sort of distress. It was kind of dark, so I motioned to Mike. He had the infrared camera, and I pointed to sort of start shooting behind me.
I'm standing there filming, and Anthony gestured to me to look over at Jim, and when I turned to look, he looked like he had trouble breathing. So I switched the camera over to infrared, and I kept an eye on what was going on with him.
No! You're not coming through me. You do not speak through my voice, you understand? You respect boundaries. Got it?
It appeared as though whatever was communicating through the Ouija session was also attacking Jim Bucknam and trying to speak through possession.
It was definitely an interesting experience. I mean, I really don't know what was happening there, or even if I'm convinced that there was any spiritual activity. None of the equipment we set up registered anything out of the normal, and of course that's not to say that nothing paranormal occurred. It just simply means that nothing measurable occurred. And I think that to study something like this takes time, and I don't know that we will ever be able to prove whether a Ouija board produces true activity or not, at least activity that's convincing to the general public. I think that it really comes down to one simple question. What do you believe?
Much like mediumistic ability, a basic belief by those involved is fundamental to the overall perception of a successful Ouija or dowsing session. But for a haunting, belief is typically the end result. A haunting can manifest in many forms and occur for a variety of reasons. Although the symptoms of each separate case can be similar in nature, they often have a defined pattern which researchers use to establish a generic haunting classification. Among the most common classifications is a phenomenon known as a residual haunting. During such an event, witnesses may report many unusual occurrences, such as apparitions, voices, footsteps, and other ghostly anomalies that very often leave them convinced they have encountered a true spirit energy. But in reality, a residual haunting is not believed to be a haunting at all. Two of the signature traits typically associated with this type of phenomenon is the anomaly's lack of intelligent interaction and the general tendency of the activity to repeat itself over time. One particular example of this can be found here at the Houghton Mansion in North Adams, Massachusetts. Home to not only a Masonic lodge, the mansion is also the haunted headquarters to the Berkshire Paranormal Group, a local investigation team which regularly conducts tours of the mansion as well as independent and joint investigations with other local groups. One particular residual haunt can be found in a specific area of the mansion's basement where the shadow of a small spirit is said to appear on a regular basis.
It's funny because you see light from outside. That we have that one street light, and it shines in and just gives you just enough light in here to maybe make out like the silhouette of this door. And then you'd be standing there, and yes, maybe it's your eyes playing tricks on you, but it's still kind of bizarre that it's about this high, and everybody can see the same thing. It comes out. Sometimes it'll like just peek out around the corner like this, and you can see it block the light, and then it comes back like this, and then you see these little light sparkles sometimes, and sometimes the little shadow, it comes out like this, you can see it, and it disappears, and who knows, sometimes we think maybe it comes out to, so we don't know.
There were about 5 of us down in the basement, and we set up our chairs, and my group had infrared cameras that we set up to point down to the doorway, and we just sat there and waited.
What did you think you saw occur?
Something come out around the wooden edge, the edge of the wooden.
How far?
Halfway up.
Like a shadow?
Like the width of a head.
Now it's totally dark.
Somebody flashed on the eye.
See how dark that is now?
I mean, it could be your eyes are tiring too, from staring.
Yeah.
After a while, people started mentioning that it looked as though shadows were starting to move, but when I looked down at the camera monitor, I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. So it seems as though if you sit in the dark for an extended period of time, your eyes are going to eventually play tricks on you.
But I used to go UFO hunting with Betty Hill. Yeah, you'd be staring at a star or a light off in the distance in the woods, and you know how your eyes move, and you suddenly see it start dancing, but it's not moving at all. It's your eye movement.
Right.
It's very hard to control.
Many believe a residual haunting to be the result of traumatic or high-energy historical events which are said to imprint themselves on the atmosphere and replay when the environmental conditions are correct. Although these claims have yet to be proven scientifically, there are many investigators throughout the world that base their research on the strength of theories such as these. Another less common haunting classification is a phenomenon known as a poltergeist or noisy ghost. Unlike a residual haunting, poltergeists can show obvious signs of intelligence since they very often interact and center themselves around a particular person or object. The very nature of poltergeist activity is the physical manipulation and often destruction of property. Therefore, it can, at times, pose certain physical dangers, and many investigators recommend that any investigation of this type of activity be handled cautiously. Although some believe poltergeists to be nothing more than telekinetic energy manifested through the victim's own subconscious distress, others believe them to be separate spiritual beings which find pleasure in the torment and harassment of others, or possibly lost souls desperately trying to gain our attention. Despite many years of study, a conclusive determination surrounding poltergeist activity has yet to be made. One of the less common but more popular classifications is what's known as a traditional or intelligent haunting. Unlike a poltergeist, a traditional haunting typically centers around a specific location and can portray a wide range of unsettling activity, which can encompass all of the physical and visual attributes of the other paranormal classifications. But there's one defining characteristic that separates a traditional haunting from all the others: the inclusion of a human or inhuman spirit. The apparitions and manifestations encountered in a traditional haunting can appear in a variety of forms. They can be as subtle as a cold spot or faint odor, and as vividly present as a bright ball of light or full-bodied apparition. Although the true form of these entities is not entirely known, many have their own opinion on why they appear the way they do.
It seems what the spirit is doing is projecting its image to you. It's projecting itself the way it sees itself. In other words, it may be projecting a mirror image as it knew itself in life. Or if it's a spirit of an inhuman nature, it's trying to make you believe something that it may be somebody from the Civil War dressed in Civil War uniform, or a small child. And incidentally, sometimes spirits wear not just period clothing, but bizarre clothing as well. They wear very minimal clothing, very, very plain, drab clothing.
Most of the time you hear of the stories, people are not dressed in modern style. They don't have a modern appearance to them. They're sort of old-fashioned or a different era. There could be a few reasons for this. One reason is it could be a residual style haunting, meaning it's just sort of a playback in time, not aware of time and space. And these are usually, according to case study, 100, 150 years old or so. That may be one of the reasons. Another reason is accessibility to locations. Most people that are investigating the paranormal are not in people's houses, are not in modern day structures. They're grave stomping in old graveyards. They're running around in abandoned buildings, going into old tuberculosis hospitals, all these places where you're going to see people of an older generation or a different style dress.
The appearance of ghosts is certainly a subject that is open to interpretation, but still, there's a bigger question in play. Why do these hauntings occur? Tales of apparitions and ghostly manifestations are thousands of years old. If these personal encounters are indeed the souls of those who have passed on, why do they linger? And where do they come from?
I think hauntings have been occurring throughout the history, at least the recorded history, of humanity. I think there are other dimensions that we don't totally comprehend or understand, and that they're concurrent with our dimension. And sometimes there's a bit of a time lapse or a crossover with these dimensions. I think that's essentially one of the main reasons that hauntings do occur.
A lot of it could be geopathic energy. A lot of it is just shifts in energy. You know, you have a house that might be standing dormant, nobody lives in it. It might go for years unhaunted, then a family moves in, they bring in kids, they might bring in energy, positive or negative, and it's kind of like lighting a torch in the middle of the woods. Sometimes it'll attract energy of the same kind.
You may be missing that element of unfinished business or untimely death, or you kind of need some sort of attachment, I believe, for a spirit or ghost to still be lingering there, and maybe we're just missing that.
In spite of the calm and quiet nature of some hauntings, entities can at times be far from peaceful. There are many researchers and psychics who believe that demons can play a large role in the spiritual infestation of a haunted location. Those troubled by demons or inhuman entities are very often the cause of their own infestation. It's believed that certain types of spiritual activities, such as seances and spirit communications, can open portals to other dimensions and allow these entities access to our world.
They usually opened up the doors somewhere along the line for that spirit to enter their lives. Were they playing with the Ouija board, tarot cards? Were they doing seances, spirit communications? These are all doors. And once those doors are open, spirit can come in. And spirit attracts spirit, whether it's human spirit or something on a negative level.
However, many skeptics equate the subject of demons to nothing more than a fairy tale or ancient mythology. But are these beings real? And what is their purpose in their torture and torment of our world?
You know, the way I look at it is they are evil. They're conscious entities that are out to create destruction, chaos, and that's really what they're after. When you deal with an inhuman entity, it's usually focused on a specific family member in a specific home, and they're trying to break down their willpower. They're trying to break them down, and they're trying to make them miserable so that they can infest them.
They are at war with certain positive forces, and personally I believe because we're God's creation, They are very envious of us because we've been given the gift of life and free choice. And that's why negative demonic hauntings occur, because it's a war against us and against God, our Creator.
The symptoms associated with a demonic haunting can range from small, insignificant manifestations to significantly more pronounced and dangerous activity, such as human possession.
Well, when you deal with lower level demons, you're basically dealing with something where they'll do little mischievous things and they'll flutter about, and I call it the flutters. And they're just like nonsense type things. You know, just enough just to annoy you, to let you know that they're around.
The difficulty in researching this type of activity, aside from its obvious inherent dangers, is primarily due to the entity's ability to appear in any form they choose.
Well, a lot of times it can disguise itself as your grandmother, your grandfather, a deceased loved one, a child. It's very confusing and it will deceive you. Very seldomly will I ever come to a quick decision that we're dealing with human spirit or we're dealing with something on a negative level. Sometimes it could take several trips to a location or dealing with a person continuously to be able to solve that puzzle and see what the next step is going to be to being able to help that person out.
Whether the haunting is traditional, poltergeist, or demonic, it's very often an unwelcome and frightening addition to most homes. For this reason, researchers will often work with their clients to help find solutions and take steps to clear their homes of any unwanted or negative entities.
We give them different ways, different things they can do in their house. One big thing is to keeping up a positive energy will help immensely. Sometimes they can have priests come in and bless their home. That will never hurt. If the energy, the house isn't like free-flowing, there's a lot of furniture, and the energy is stifled in some areas, the more openness you have, the more it can flow. And we'll give them tips like that and things they can read, and we will always stay in touch with them. If they think things are fine and it comes up again 3 months later, they can get right back to us again. And we'll go back and look for another way to help. Every case is unique, basically, on their needs.
One particular method of clearing unwanted entities is what's known as an exorcism. Jim Bucknam, a medium and investigator for the Boston Paranormal Investigators Group, does just such a clearing.
What I usually do is, first the client will do a walkthrough with me through the house and show me the places that they think that they've seen the entity, and they'll describe stories to me about some of their experiences.
So what I'm going to do is just walk all over the place.
Hey,
I'll go outside, I'll go upstairs, downstairs.
My daughter moved. She's in a lockup right now because she's become extremely mentally unstable. I just sort of kind of closed her door. Okay. It's a disaster area in her bedroom. It's very
I need to look in her bedroom. I won't disturb her.
I'm just letting you know that this.
No, I don't really. I'm not
You're welcome to any,
concerned about that. I'm
more
more concerned with
the
the energy and seeing what's what. To do that, I need to have the whole house.
Go for it.
And then I go through myself, and I usually carry a legal pad with me, and anything that comes to me, any perceptions that I have, anything that I see, I write it down. It's sort of like it's like detective work. I want to know what's happening, why is this haunting taking place, what's the cause of it, what kind of entities are involved, how are the people being affected, and I go through that whole process. And usually when I go through a house, I may fill out 3 or 4 pages of notes, and that's just for myself so that in the end, when I perform an exorcism, I know what it is that I'm dealing with.
Once the history and primary areas of the activity have been established, an exorcism is performed, typically in the most infected area of the home.
Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Odin, Odin, Odin. Freya, Freya, Freya. Thor, Thor, Thor. Amun-Ra, Amun-Ra, Amun-Ra. The great white buffalo, the great white buffalo, the great white buffalo. I'm calling upon Jesus, all 7 of the archangels, and various other mansions of light or mansions of God. I am asking them to come to that particular location where I am at. While I'm doing that, the energy, I'm tapping into the energy that they represent. And that energy is coming into me. And in many ways, I'm sort of like a magnifying glass or a key. On this residence, take any dark force entities therein and send them to whence they came and bind them there never to return. Dissipate any negative thought forms from within this residence to the universal substance. As I'm saying what I would like for them to do at that place, taking whatever entities that are there and sending them to whence they came and bind them there never to return, taking any object within the person's home and neutralizing it, getting rid of any negative energy that's in the house, closing any portals or doorways to other dimensions where these entities are coming through. And all that energy is coming into me from these different places. At the same time, the entities that are at the home are fighting me because they don't want this to happen. Once this is accomplished, then place roundabout above and below this residence 7 HD sharp shields for its protection. Thank you. It used to be when I first started doing this, I'd get stuff thrown at me, I'd get tripped, physical stuff. Now they've stopped that, and it's more of a sort of psychic pressure. They're trying to force you to stop, and they don't want me to do it. I may get pains in my stomach or various other pains throughout my body as they're trying to force me to quit. But that's when I just got to sort of buckle in, and I continue to say the prayer that I'm saying. And when I'm finished, I say thank you, and all this energy that's been built up in me from these beings that I've called upon is suddenly released, and it puts what I've asked to be done into motion. All these entities are literally taken to the place that they have earned, that they have justly earned. It begins. Many psychics who have seen it says it sort of looks like a white tornado going through the place as it sort of sucks everything up. And it's done. It works every single time, guaranteed. And the place is clean again. Little by little, more and more, it'll start getting better and better. Most people who have experienced it say, wow, there's a big difference in how the place feels. The energy's better. People sleep better at night. The entities are gone, and they don't come back.
Psychic or scientific, medieval or modern, the fundamental symptoms associated with a spirit encounter have changed little throughout the years, and the experiences reported have done far more to inspire artistic imagination and poetic license than they have to quell the doubting claims of what remains to be a widely skeptical community.
I think it's fine, and actually probably good that we have non-believers out there that don't believe in the paranormal. It keeps us on our toes. It makes us try to only put forth the most strict evidence that we've captured.
Healthy skepticism is a very good thing. Closed-minded skepticism is not, and I think the public wants to be informed and be aware.
Still, it's possible that the reason for this high level of skepticism may reside with the experience itself. Although volumes of purported evidence are captured by thousands of investigators each year, the most significant and convincing evidence remains to be largely personal.
I had seen a family member who had passed on at the funeral home, and I was about 11 years old and couldn't figure out why I was seeing them and what the reason was. So I wanted to, as I got older, started reading about it and trying to figure out why I saw what I saw and how it was all possible.
I literally chased it into the bedroom, calling my son's name. He was about the same size. And when I got into the bedroom, he wasn't there. And I actually accused him of lying and hiding, and he came up from the basement 5 minutes later and asked me if I was calling him. And I'd never seen it. I chased it down the hall. That was my defining moment.
I was 14. I was in the kitchen with my mother. It was in August, and it was a very muggy day. There was no air. And she used to hang the fly swatter on the back of the door, and it started doing this, back and forth, and then the the utensils that were hanging over the stove started going back and forth, and I looked at my mom, and she looked at me. I said, "You saw that, right?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Cool."
About 2 years ago, I thought I heard sounds in the evening upon going to sleep. And I thought they were voices. I normally did the normal thing, and I checked outside. Wasn't my neighbors, no televisions were on, and I started to hear it on a fairly constant basis.
I was in a cemetery, and I was alone, which is something that we don't usually do, but I was young and I was alone, and as I was gathering my equipment at the end of the night, about 4:30 in the morning, I felt something grab my leg, and sort of a thrust forward, a push down. I was pushed down, and sort of just had a feeling come over me that I wasn't wanted there anymore.
For many, proof of a haunting goes far beyond the personal experiences of others. It requires tangible evidence which can be studied and validated through scientific methods. Unfortunately, the scientific community has little interest in the study of paranormal phenomena and has rarely produced equipment with the sole intention of being used in psychical research. Therefore, those who research this field must rely on the data captured with only the equipment that is available.
EMF meters, motion sensors, video cameras, basic regular cameras, recorders, flashlights, and basically thermometers. That's pretty much a standard equipment case.
Every piece of equipment that is used in this field has not been created for this field. It's been created for other things.
If there was one machine that was going to point the ghost out to you and take its picture and have a conversation with it, well, then that's what a piece of equipment we would bring. But there is no magical machine yet, and we don't really know what we're looking for and how to find it. So we're using what equipment is available for us in this day and age to try and find what's unknown.
There's times we can't cover every area at every time, and we can set up equipment that, say, a motion sensor could pick up movement if no one's in that area. So it just gives us a broader range and more things we can look at later.
Much of the equipment used in psychical research was designed to monitor atmospheric conditions such as radiation, humidity, and barometric pressure. The goal is to establish a trend in the readings which may help predict or confirm the presence of paranormal activity.
For me, when I see there's a meter getting a reading, that's significant. It's significant to where maybe I can get other evidence. I can try for EVPs, I can try for photos at that time. Usually anytime we see a motion on any of them, we're basically taking pictures right away, recording right away, because it could be telling us there's something there. Well, our group believes that moon phases and barometric pressure actually can affect the activity on a case. So we do track that, just to kind of be able to compile some data. When the moon phase is in this phase and the barometric pressure was higher, we got better results or whatever.
Changes in the data collected during an investigation not only serve to provide clues to the presence of paranormal activity, but monitoring even the most basic atmospheric conditions, such as temperature, can also serve to dictate the methods researchers use to investigate.
If it's too cold and we're investigating outside, we have to be careful not to breathe when we're taking pictures, because breath can be mistaken as a mist. If it's too humid, there's extra moisture in the air, which could create false positive orbs in our pictures. So all of those things are really important when you're planning your investigation.
Equally important are the methods in which any activity is documented. Although devices such as the Geiger counter or EMF detector may provide claims to the presence of an entity, they will, however, do very little to capture tangible evidence of such an event. For this reason, researchers must rely on a more traditional method of documentation. Photography. Are these photos proof of an afterlife existence? Or are they merely the product of dirty developing solution and an overactive imagination? The answer may never be known, but what is known is that photos like these have been captured by investigators for over 100 years. They have been the subject of countless debates and in some cases controversy. But are they real? Although photographs of full-bodied apparitions are still relatively rare, the capture of what some believe to be actual photographic evidence of the paranormal has increased over the years with advances in photo technology. Though film cameras are still used and at times preferred by some researchers, the digital age has taken the field by storm.
Digital cameras, I think almost every paranormal investigator I know has one, and mainly that's because they're extremely easy to use. When you're on an investigation, you're taking pictures, you're able to see right away if you're picking something up.
Well, for me, I've used both, and the digital camera is actually easier. You can get more pictures. You don't have the high cost of film developing. You can just get a broader range, and you're not as limited on investigations.
Still, in spite of general preference and ease of use, the evidence produced by digital cameras leaves some to question their significance as source for truly convincing evidence. Digital photos are much easier to manipulate than those produced by film, and as a result are often disregarded by skeptics. Regardless of the preference, film or digital, the field of paranormal investigation has yet to produce an undisputed photo of paranormal activity.
Look at the drapes in this one.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's awesome.
Look at the other one. This anomaly, they said, shows up in just about everybody's pictures.
What am I looking at, though?
Look at the ring.
I'm not really sure what it is that I'm seeing, though. It's kind of...
We're getting amazing EMF in there.
I heard.
I don't know if you call it an ability or a sense that I have, but I can look at a photograph or a piece of film and I can say, no, that's not something paranormal. That's just something that just happened.
One of the most common photographic anomalies captured is a phenomenon known as orbs, strange circular translucent objects which can appear randomly in photos taken at just about any location and are typically unseen by the naked eye. Every day, hundreds of pictures like these are taken all over the world, and not just by investigators, but by people from all walks of life. Some believe this strange phenomenon is conclusive proof that we are surrounded by paranormal energy, and these translucent orbs represent a passing life force that exists in a world beyond death. But others have their own opinion.
I believe that orbs are usually nothing. People say, well, they interact with us. We have to remember that insects will interact with us. They'll go toward us, they'll go away from us. And so will dust and moisture if there's static electricity. So until orbs spell out my name or something, I'm going to continue to be underwhelmed by that.
When you see orbs in photos and on video, it's usually, in most cases, nothing more than dust or an insect. We've actually been able to recreate that in a laboratory. We've photographed spinning dust and dust in the air, and when it spins, it looks exactly like an orb. A true energy orb will emit its own light, will have its own pattern. It won't follow the wind or the direction of a breeze.
A true orb is always perfectly round, is always somewhat transparent, and is going to show up in a picture. You may have 2 or 3 in one picture, but they're going to be scattered. If you're looking at a picture that contains dust or rain or snow or some other particle in the air, it may not be round. It may be solid. And you'll see them overlapping, some further away, some closer. They'll be much more dense in the picture than a true orb is.
Most groups have their own opinions on the validity of orbs as evidence, and very often will avoid relying on one single piece of evidence as proof of a haunting.
We tend to try and use evidence that has other evidence to back it up. For orbs, for instance, we generally, if we have just a single orb or even a lot of orbs, which is pretty indicative of dust, if we just have one orb and that's the only thing in a picture and there's the only occurrence at that time, we probably will end up debunking it. We're not really passing it off as solid evidence. We like to be able to say, not only was there an orb in the picture at this time, but there was a personal experience taking place. There was EMF fluctuation. We captured an EVP in the room at the relative same time as the orb. In other words, we're not just relying on one piece of evidence. If we have 2 or 3 things happening at the same time, then we're more apt to really say this is paranormal opposed to just something that is naturally occurring.
When you've basically canceled out everything it could be, then it's paranormal. And by saying it's paranormal, it's not saying that it's a ghost or a spirit. All it's saying that is it's something beyond the normal.
In the world of paranormal investigation, the evidence gathered by researchers is not strictly limited to visual. There is another kind of evidence which, if proven out, may constitute the possibility of actual verbal communication with the other side. The evidence is known as EVP.
EVP's electronic voice phenomena is something that has come into the forefront today like I can't believe. And over the years, our theory was that it was attracted, the energy was attracted to the magnetic tapes, the cassette tapes, the videotapes. But then we came along with the digital age. And I was curious to see what was going to happen. Today, now with the digital world, some of the EVPs that are coming forth are phenomenal. Full sentences. Well, we're working on several investigations right now, and I had 3 people that have never gotten EVPs. And they're walking away with EVPs right now that are blowing me out of the water.
I have asked an entity to say 2 words, and that entity, whoever, whatever it is, came back and gave me the 2 words. I've asked direct questions, I've gotten direct answers, I've asked linguistic questions, and I've gotten intelligible answers to the linguistic questions. So there are intelligent entities. They are not always on cue. They're erratic. That is the nature of the entity. Are you afraid of us? You want us to go away?
Usually when, like for me for instance, when I go on an investigation, I might take like 20 pictures, but I'll have 4 hours of audio, because I just feel audio is more substantial to what we're doing than pictures, because pictures, can be very easily, not faked, but, misunderstood. EVP is a little bit harder to, explain.
The capturing of electronic voice phenomena has become a staple of modern paranormal investigating. In fact, it's hard to find a group today that doesn't incorporate this type of research into their investigation. Many researchers have their own methods and techniques for capturing EVPs, from equipment preferences and specific questions asked to how to handle the recorder.
A lot of people, the first time they'll do it, if they're a little nervous about things, they'll just set it in a room and leave it and walk away and maybe go eat dinner or leave the house, go shopping or something. Then they'll come back and just listen. If you listen really close, you can hear it. Or you can hold it in your hand and ask specific questions, maybe even related to the building or the place you're at.
When I'm trying to get EVPs, I use at least 2 recorders at one time. That way, I know if there's a sound on one and there's not on another, there's a good chance that's an EVP. If you pick up a sound on both recorders, it's generally not going to be an EVP. It's some kind of background noise.
I always tell people in our investigations, do everything natural. Don't go in provoking. Don't disturb things. Put your tape recorders down. Have your normal conversations. Talk about what might be happening in that environment, in that haunting. And you'll walk away with some of the most phenomenal EVPs.
Can you give us a sign of your presence here? Do you like that we've come here tonight?
Although techniques for capturing EVPs can vary from investigator to investigator, nearly everyone agrees that there is one specific environmental condition which must be met before any recording can begin: peace and quiet.
When I go out and try and capture EVPs, I try and make sure I get the quietest atmosphere as possible. Otherwise, I won't do it. If there's noise, I just don't record.
You can have someone in another room down the hallway whispering, and that will completely destroy any audio.
Honestly, the best way to do EVPs is nobody in the building, especially nobody on the floor above you, on the same floor as you. That'd be the preferred way to do EVP. Nobody in the room.
Necessary. I'll hold her.
Are these voices from beyond the grave? Are they communication with an alternate dimension? Or are they simply radio interference caused by overcrowded airwaves? Like nearly all EVPs, these voices were not heard by investigators at the time of recording, only on playback. If they are not radio waves or electronic interference, how is it possible they're not heard?
Well, because the theory is that the voices are being printed directly on the recording media. It's not something it's an electrical impulse rather than an audio something. It's not a noise that's out there in the air. Somehow or other, the voice is being imprinted directly on the media.
The recording equipment used to capture this phenomenon is fairly common, but does vary in technology, and the specific choice of what to use is often a matter of personal preference.
We use a variety of different things. Some people still use magnetic media, regular cassette recorders, but not generally. Pretty much everybody now uses digital recorders of one type or another. I have a wide variety, and everybody seems to like different ones.
If we are to consider these voices to be direct communication with the dead, how is it possible for such an anomaly to occur? What connection is there between our world and an afterlife which lets these beings communicate this way?
I think it's the way they're formed is some kind of thought process. My view of things is that thoughts are very real things, and they form very real things. And so somehow or other the voices are being produced by some sort of thought processes. That's why we're still researching it, because we don't really know.
Unfortunately, the voices captured by researchers are very often unclear, and exactly what's being said is usually the object of intense speculation. Therefore, investigation teams find it necessary to classify the EVPs collected and grade them according to clarity.
Class A EVP is one that's generally heard clearly by pretty much everybody over loudspeakers, over computer loudspeakers or something like that. And there's usually not much dissension as to what's being said. Class B EVP is, you know there's words being said, but it's not always clear. That's where the interpretation comes into effect a little bit. Some people think it says one thing, somebody says it looks like something else. In Class C, you know there's some kind of mumbling or whispering going on, but it's not audible, really. It's sort of more like background noise than anything.
When you hear something, you know, on audio, especially if it's like Class B or Class C, it could be almost anything, and it's just very hard to understand. I mean, it's just a sound that's like mushed together, and hearing that sound mushed together, people hear different things.
I think EVPs, for the most part, I mean, there are possibilities that you could be picking up on radio transmissions, cell phone transmissions, and so forth, background noise. I've heard a lot of EVPs that, it could be saying one thing, but if you listen to it, it could be saying another thing too. They're not that clear. It's when they become very, very clear and concise that you need to take a look at them and consider them paranormal. I fully believe that they exist and that they're real in many cases.
Many skeptics attribute the differences in EVP interpretation to a phenomenon known as pareidolia, a tendency of the human mind to make sense of random noises. However, others believe the EVP responses are far too specific to be random noise or caused by pareidolia.
These aren't radio signals, and this is not noise that my mind is creating into being voices. It definitely is not that. That's one thing, because they're too vowel and consonant specific, and noise is not vowel and consonant specific.
To find out if the interpretation of these voices are truly tainted by the opinions and experiences of the research teams, the New Gravity media crew decided to conduct a study with 10 volunteers of varying ages and occupations.
Essentially what we did was we got a hold of 6 Class A EVP files, some of the best we could find, which were donated from 3 different investigation groups. And we played them for 10 volunteers, all of which who had no prior experience in paranormal investigation and who were not privy to any of the background information on the files. They didn't know where they were recorded or how they were recorded or who recorded them or what it was they were supposed to be listening to. To them, they were just audio files, period. And when they were done listening, we asked them what they think they might have heard, if anything at all.
It's Me, Grandpa was recorded in a cemetery during an investigation. It's just a good example of a young child's voice. The investigator wasn't trying for anything specific at the time. He was just at a grave and said, "Is anybody here? Anybody want to say anything?" And a little boy's voice said, "It's me, Grandpa."
I thought I could hear a child's voice, a little bit garbled, and I thought it was to the final point was, "Go ahead and talk."
All I know is that it sounded like a child could have been saying something. I don't know what. It was totally unidentifiable.
A Move Your Head EVP was collected in a Presbyterian church in Trenton, New Jersey. The investigator just sat down in a pew and turned a recorder on to note that. She made notes when she moved. And a voice, very clear woman's voice, says, "Move your head," as though she'd sat in front of somebody in the pew.
It was a woman, it sounded like a woman's voice, but I couldn't make out what the woman was saying. Just couldn't.
Two sounded like it might have been an older woman saying, "Feel this hand."
Damn you! The Damn You EVP was collected in a private house several years ago. It's just one that stands out as very loud and clear, and you know exactly what it is. When we play it at seminars, we don't introduce it at all. We just say, "Here's this voice," and obviously everybody knows what it is.
Damn you! File 3, I clearly heard someone say, "Damn you," and it was almost too clear, and it didn't seem real. That's not to say that it's not, obviously, but it was just clear as a bell.
They were either saying "damn you" or "AMU," which I don't know, maybe Alabama Methodist, I don't know, something.
When the study was over, the results fascinating. 2 of the files were agreed upon unanimously, and the other files, while most agreed there were voices present, had difficulty hearing what exactly was said.
Unless it's a really clear EVP where there's no doubt as to what's being said, it's open to interpretation a lot of times.
One of the interesting things we noticed with the study was that almost everybody agreed there were voices present. And almost everybody agreed on the gender of the voices, but when it came to determining what was being said, there were only 2 files that absolutely had no question. But I think it's important to note that it wasn't just the EVPs they couldn't understand. They even had trouble understanding some of the human voices that were present. And, you know, maybe there's something to all of this, but what we need to do is we need to pay closer attention. I think that the fact that there's voices there at all are undeniable and pretty impressive, but what's the cause? I think that's the real question.
Well, again, I think it's some sort of a thought energy, whether it's being specifically directed and formed somehow on the other side and produced physically here.
Photographic or audio, in spite of the vast quantity of evidence historically collected by researchers, the field of paranormal study has yet to produce a single piece of universally undisputable proof. Could it be such evidence doesn't exist, or is the problem in the hands of the researchers?
Again, being a skeptic, I've met a lot of mediums. I've gone to places like spiritualist churches and so forth, and I still have not come across one piece of evidence that has been at all convincing to me.
I think it's very difficult for paranormal researchers to capture true evidence because these things, you just can't turn them on like a light switch. There's no rhyme or reason as to what they're doing or when they're doing it, unless we're talking about a residual haunting. But for the most part, it's very difficult to be there at the right time and get these things to interact with us and capture the evidence.
Although a majority of the theories and principles purported by investigation groups have basic scientific position, they're still far from being tangible. And in spite of the hours of planning and preparation, evidence can still turn up where it's least expected. Just such a situation occurred during a joint investigation at the Colonial Inn in Yarmouthport, Massachusetts.
Well, my friend Rob Tremblay of CERT Investigations called us in and wanted to confer on this haunted inn. And because Sandra and I and Andrew deal essentially with inhuman spirits, I mean, we do all facets of paranormal investigation, but our specialty is inhuman spirits. He called us in to confer and investigate with him.
I saw her through here. Karen's been sensing her too.
What exactly did you see?
I saw a woman out there taking care of flowers. It's just the same thing Karen explained.
Full apparition?
Pretty much, yeah.
Was
was on the stairs leading to the cupola?
Yeah.
We'll have to check that place out. Now, of course, an investigation of this magnitude takes at least several visits, and we were there once. And we did experience some minor activity. We did not obtain any EVPs, but there were some photographic anomalies, which we're still looking into at this time.
Among the various evidence collected during this investigation, one of the more unusual and somewhat controversial pieces was in fact captured by one of the New Gravity media crew members during a routine EVP session.
We were in a small dining room area conducting an EVP session. It was basically a question and answer session where we were asking, is there anybody who would like to communicate with us?
Is there anyone here that would like to communicate with us?
If you are here, would you appear on my hand? Essentially, while we're doing that, you may not get any results unless you're doing coupling, you're doing more than one form of communication at a time and data at a time too. You may be videotaping as well as recording, which was going on at the time. Sandra and I were essentially using magnetic tapes to try to get answers, and our results on audio proved inconclusive. We didn't really get any answers per se, but it was interesting, and it takes a lot of patience because you're sitting down answering questions, which is different than a seance. We are not the vehicles that it's communicating through. Magnetic tape is.
During the EVP session, something unusual began to occur. One of the New Gravity media camera crew noticed a peculiar light anomaly around Sandra Johnson's head.
Well, I was standing at the end of the table, watching the EVP session, and we had about 7 people there. And at one point I looked down to the camera monitor to check the shot, and I saw these little green lights flying around Sandra's head. And they came out for a few seconds, and then they disappeared, and then they came back. And at first I'm thinking it must be a lens flare from the lamp in the background or something like that. But when I looked closer, I could see that there were actually 3 lights, and they were all going in different directions, completely independent of each other. And that's definitely not characteristic of a lens flare from a single source.
Are these lights evidence of spirit activity, or are they simply a camera malfunction?
I can tell you what it's definitely not. It's definitely not an insect. We would have known if it's an insect. We would have been able to see it if it was that close. And one thing my wife Sandra does not like, and that's insects around her face.
If I had insects flying at my face, into my eyes, I would notice them. I would have noticed that. I have to say I didn't experience anything of a negative nature or even a positive nature. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything.
Quite honestly, I saw nothing. When that was going on, I was kind of sitting in the background doing my little observation routine and just kind of feeling it out and watching as they did their EVP session. And there was nothing seen by the naked eye. I think anybody that was in that room could attest to that. I did not see anything. You know, there were no bugs flying around. There were no light glares that were obvious to me.
It may have been a camera glitch. I do not know. I can't explain it. But I know it was not the result of the camera moving, because the camera was basically stationary at the time. And the anomaly wasn't conducive with the way the camera was set, and it seemed to be independent, moving on its own.
As to whether the anomalies are paranormal in nature, I really don't know. It's interesting that, you know, we were asking for proof of an entity's presence. Maybe this was this entity's form of communication. It was giving us a visual sign of its presence there, because we didn't wind up recording any EVPs.
Since the capture and validation of evidence is primarily reliant on the environment and methods of which it's collected, effective leadership, knowledge, and cooperation among research team members can be vital in determining an investigation's success.
Wait a minute. Come down here for a second. Loop it through the banister and go straight up. Yeah. Because this way you're just going right through the middle of the banisters.
You got the tape?
Yep. Oh, hold on a second.
A significant understanding of the equipment used and an overall plan for a projected outcome is not only essential to a good investigation, it's the sign of a good investigator.
I guess we could try it out and see what happens. If it doesn't work out, we can always switch it.
Really, I think it just, the biggest thing it takes to be a great investigator, or to be a good investigator, would be honesty. You need to be honest. You need to be able to be honest with the people that you're working with, and you need to be able to be honest with yourself.
I think in order for someone to be a good paranormal investigator, they definitely need to be of sound mind, pretty free of psychiatric trauma or physical trauma as well. You need to be able to get about. But most importantly, I think you need to have a good grasp of all your senses, and I think you need to be level-headed, and I think you need to have the ability to just relax, because a lot of times you're going to go in these places and be there for 10, 12 hours at a time and not find anything. And as long as you have a good attitude and you can be there and just have fun with it, you'll never get disappointed.
The proper setup and positioning of equipment is undeniably a crucial part of almost any scientific investigation. However, knowing exactly where to place the equipment is usually nothing more than an educated guess. To deal with this contingency, investigators typically rely on the client's personal experiences and the recorded history of activity to guide them.
We get there, we interview the homeowner or the family members who are involved to get a feel on what the house is about, you know, what's going on, to sort of have ideas where we should set up our cameras. You know, because like this one here, we got it, it's
right, facing
taken here.
Right.
Maybe if we can get one like over here and face, you know, the other open area.
Well, right now, remember, there's a refrigerator in the corner here. Old
Okay.
refrigerator, that's what we got now. It's looking down the hallway toward the steps. You put another camera in this, like the camera's here on the refrigerator top. Put a second camera over here facing down the hallway.
Yes,
the other way.
yes, that's what I mean.
You got it.
Okay,
No
thanks.
problem. Let's get this. Oh, hold on. Before we position
the other one right here.
Okay, okay. And then we'll tape the wire down. Like I said before, you don't want the wire to be pulling on the camera. The way the camera's just gonna tape it down. Back here with a little bit of slack. And then, okay. Okay, Pierre, we're gonna position the camera. Hold on. Is it good?
A little bit to the left and down a little.
Keep twisting it to the right.
Okay.
A little bit more.
Stop. Great.
Okay, our cameras are running.
10th floor. Okay, everyone up. The first team we're going to start at, it's going to be me and Alexis. We're going to be doing the first floor in the basement. Team 2 is going to be JM and Dan. They're going to be doing the second and third floor. About a half hour or into an hour, we're going to switch teams, switch members, so that way everyone always gets to work with each other and everyone gets to go everywhere.
After what can quickly become several hours of equipment setup and planning, the investigation begins. In darkened rooms with nothing but a flashlight, senses, and a various array of investigation equipment to guide them, researchers pair up in teams and patiently wait, searching for any signs of paranormal activity.
Different investigators work better with certain people. Everybody has their own technique. I personally sometimes would like to taunt, you know, and try and get the spirits going. Some people aren't comfortable doing that, so obviously I'm not going to work with somebody like that. So you're gonna know who works best with each other and what their particular skill is. If I'm really good at EVP, I'm also not going to pair up with somebody else who's really good at EVP. I might be somebody who's more of a photographic expert. So you know you mix and match who works well with what, whose techniques best pair with somebody else. Sometimes maybe I'll take somebody who's more scientific approach and put them with somebody who might douse and be a little bit more psychic-like, and we'll go from there.
My MO generally, what I like to do is I usually have a camera on me. Sometimes I have a recorder on me. I'll take pictures once in a while, but really my MO is I like to sit and observe.
This stage of the investigation can take anywhere from a few hours to an entire night without producing a single shred of evidence. In fact, most teams find that 80% of their investigations usually yield no evidence at all. But it's the rare few that do that keep them determined to continue and capture conclusive proof of the unknown.
The client's in the house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We come in for 3 hours. So the likelihood that something's going to happen in those 3 hours is not as strong as it is for them. So we will come back and do it again. And more times than not, we'll get something on that second investigation that we didn't get the first time.
During a typical investigation, researchers first establish a general base reading of the location's temperature and electromagnetic field. These base figures are useful to identify any environmental fluctuations. They are also useful to establish any correlation between environment and paranormal phenomenon should any photo or audio evidence be captured. To ensure these readings are accurate and to avoid any contamination of evidence, many find it necessary to pay close attention to the environmental impacts of their own team. Although a quiet and controlled environment is one of the primary goals of most groups, there are times when things don't always go as planned.
What else was that Aunt Lucy doing at Mom? Drinking.
Drinking and having presents.
Is your car? Wine. Lots of wine. At least I have another bow I have to tie.
The first night we went out with Lisper, everything was great, except for one totally crippling factor: the noise. The people who were running the restaurant decided to have some kind of social event right in the middle of the investigation, and not only was collecting EVPs out of the question, but the investigators couldn't even hear each other talking. It was terrible.
While most would agree that any background noise can taint or destroy the audio collected on an investigation, very often the cause is not always the client. Research teams can sour their own investigations by failing to remain quiet or even by the presence of uncoordinated or uncooperative team members, a situation which has some creating strict guidelines for inclusion into their groups.
You see a lot of teams out there with people that you think, why are they here? They have to talk to clients, they have to ease people's fears, they have to educate the public, and they just don't fit that mold per se. And I think the teams need to choose their members a little more carefully.
When the investigation is over, the evaluation of evidence begins. What took 2 hours to record can take 4 hours to evaluate, a tedious and at times daunting task, but one that many groups find well worth the effort and essential to their reputation and credibility as paranormal researchers. Like any field of study, paranormal investigation is subject to its share of harsh criticism and derogatory accusations, not only from skeptics, but from other teams and colleagues. A problem many believe is the result of an unpopular investigation doctrine or the failure to challenge their clients' claims for the sole purpose of sensationalizing their own reputation.
I think that a lot of teams need to incorporate science into their work. They need to incorporate a skeptic into their team, make sure they keep that skeptic view. I think teams need to start trying to disprove some of the claims from these people so that they have add a little credibility to themselves.
Although investigating in the dark is a typical practice of most teams, there are those who find it unnecessary, such as the members of ISIS Investigations, a spirit investigating witches coven from New York.
We found that spirits don't care what time it is. Most people miss the things that happen during the day because they're so wrapped up in the mundane, getting ready to go to work, get the kids off to school. So when little things happen, they don't even pay attention. At night when they go to lay down and get comfortable and everything is quiet, that's when they notice things. But that doesn't mean it's the only time that it happens. So we do a lot, 90% of are done in the daytime, and we usually always get evidence. So.
The daylight investigations and the fact that they're witches is not the only traits that make ISIS Investigations unique. They are also completely comprised of mediums. To find out if this type of demographic and technique has any bearing on the evidence collected, we decided to follow ISIS on an investigation here. at the old Knox Mansion in Johnstown, New York. This large neoclassic 42-room Victorian estate was once the home of Charles and Rose Knox, creators of the famous Knox Gelatin Company. Various reports throughout the years tell of mysterious sightings of the deceased Knox family, strange voices, footsteps, and fragile items in the home being inexplicably broken.
Very cool. It's a good sign.
What's the significance?
Well, hawk is messengers from the gods, and raven is messengers from the dead. Gonna go up and ask them if it's okay if we start?
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
While Patricia and Dana contact the owner of the home, the rest of the team prepares for the investigation, unaware of what might await them inside.
Yeah, when you enter the door, this is the room you'll be in.
Yeah, and then we do 1, 2, then skip the library, 3,
Yeah, you gotta
4,
skip the library.
4, 5, and then we'll take a break, okay?
Yeah, you start with the gold
Hello.
room. Hey, darling, how are you?
Good. Gold room, so...
Hey, Marty, this is Justin,
Hello.
Satish, Robin, Angela. We don't want them to get preconceived notions. Right.
Okay.
They always go in cold. Okay, guys, let's go.
So gold room first, Pat? Gold room first.
None of the mansion's history or details of the haunting, however, are given to the team prior to the investigation. They are also instructed to investigate the mansion's library last. This is done to avoid any preconceived opinions which may contaminate any evidence collected by the group. After entering the mansion and unpacking their equipment, the investigation began. One of the first rooms investigated was the gold room, named for the 18-karat gold scrolling which lines the ceiling. Several members of the investigation team made claims to sensing the presence of a woman and possibly a small child, which they believe occupy the room.
It was hard to get like a solid image because there was so much and the house was filled with so much stuff, but that is where I picked up an image of like a, not a child, but a youngish woman and then a young male child there, like around the piano. And I also picked up on, you know, a Native American woman, but that wasn't something that we were able to verify with any of the research afterwards.
The images Angela picked up on were not only verifiable through the home's history, they were also sensed by another member of her team at a different point during the investigation.
If there was any object in that room that she was most close to, it was the piano. But to say that the piano and her are connected to the house, or if she's just connected to the piano and the piano is not from the house, it was hard to differentiate or discern at that moment.
Although claims of activity in the gold room were not able to be documented scientifically, they were reinforced by other team members who claimed to have had temperature fluctuations in and around the piano area.
Actually, when I first came in here, I had a pretty good fluctuation in front of the piano. It stayed consistent the whole time, but then I got really hot and it sprung right up to 28 to 32 Celsius, and then it went back down. It was normal the rest of the entire time.
Directly adjacent to the gold room is the mansion's dining room, also the subject of synonymous psychic impressions. Here, 3 members of the team felt the presence of a maid staff that used to work at the mansion.
When we got to the dining room, I said, I do sense the history of this room. It reminds me of like maids walking around. And right below it, I wrote down that I feel a sense of sadness in the room, and the word loss came into my mind. I'm not sure what kind of loss. And my first guess was I thought there was a loss of a young girl in this room. I'm not so sure. And then as we did the history, yes, that's what I felt. And because, again, we went in cold, we didn't know what the history of the house was. And then after the history was done, we realized that she did have, children that did pass away very early. And and Angela and I were just talking about this, and we were thinking that for a very wealthy family, the burden of looking after the kids probably fell on the kitchen help and the maids and so forth. And they probably would feel sad being more connected to the child if the child does pass away.
Well, especially in this family, because both the parents were very, very active business people, and it more so for the time than a different type of, stay-at-home mom. Rose wasn't a stay-at-home mom. She was helping with the business a great deal of time, so the staff were probably more involved with the child rearing.
Yeah, I also noted maids in that room. I sensed someone putting linen away after doing the daily laundry. And I felt like she had bumped my hip, telling me to get out of the way so that she can get into the drawers.
I had a similar experience where I felt almost like when you're in a crowded room and somebody just kind of like nudges you a little, like, you know that they're there, but there was no one else around. It was over by the window benches in that same area.
The billiard room is the largest of the mansion's 42 rooms. It houses not only a 300-year-old lava stone fireplace, but according to the ISIS investigation team, this room is also the location of what they claim is one of 3 physical spirit encounters.
Okay, so in the billiard room, I know a couple people that have felt head pressure.
Yeah, I got dizzy when I walked into the room, so.
And somebody felt something grab their leg.
That was me. Yep.
Yep.
I think I was standing by the fireplace, and I was just looking around just to get a feel of the room. And then right below me, I felt something grabbing my leg, and I just had to shake it off. It wasn't like something was tugging me where I couldn't break free from it. It felt kind of almost like quicksand a little bit. It was there at one moment, and then it wasn't there. It's like where your leg felt this weight going right through it, and then you could just walk freely, but there's this afterfeel from your senses, like on your nerves, where you knew there was something there because you can feel the tingle still there, but it's no longer there anymore. It's just the echo of whatever grabbed you.
The group's psychic artist Angela Kaufman also felt impressions of a presence in the room and drew this picture of who she believes to be one of the original 4 builders of the Knox Mansion.
When you drew that picture, what was your impression of what you were drawing?
I had no idea. I'll be really honest with you. A lot of times, especially in a house like this, there was so much going on, I had to just literally like draw first and ask questions later. And what I've learned is to try not to interpret it, because in the past I've had sites where I try to interpret, even artistically, and say, well, that doesn't quite fit with the face, and I change something, and it later, it could have been what, it's like when you change your answer on a test. So
right, second guessing yourself.
You're usually wrong.
We train our investigators to trust their first
just
instinct.
go by instinct.
Don't worry about what it means until afterwards, because by the time you get done figuring out what it means, you're going to lose it, and you won't be able to finish.
Right, it cuts off your intuition. So I just drew the guy with the hat. It was in the billiard room, and actually that's the only time that I had the EMF detector that you let me borrow. I just happened to look down at the floor, and it was giving us a reading while I was drawing this guy.
The billiard room was not the only place in the house where investigators were subject to physical interaction. The attic, too, presented some unusual experiences. In addition to Patricia Gardner's claim of being grabbed by the arm, Robin Evans and one of the New Gravity media crew reported an unusual experience with the attic door.
I know, Robin, I remember the experience with the door.
Oh, yes.
I remember looking up and I remember seeing you just smiling with the door against your back. And I'm wondering what was going on. And I turned on the camera a little too late to capture the door moving. But can you describe what happened there?
I think there was some entity there that did not want me to go in and see that disaster. I had a nauseous feeling in my stomach. And every time I tried to go through that door, it started to close. So I finally had pulled it open, and as I was going through, something was closing it. But at this point, I was already in the way of the door, so it couldn't close. And that's when, as the door had just touched my back, is when you had turned around and saw what was going on. Because I had my back was to the door, but yet it was still moving, and there was no wind.
And I saw it open back up. It moved back a little bit. That's when I turned on the camera, and I took some video of the door, but I didn't see anything moving. And I tried getting a close-up of the bottom so you could really see. Yeah. I mean, that was an unexplainable thing to me. But
The unexplainable is precisely what groups such as ISIS are seeking. However, what's seen and what is real can very often be two different things, adding confusion to any investigation. Just such an incident was discovered in the mansion's basement when the team encountered what appeared to be a witch's altar.
Can you describe what was on the table down there?
Well, there was a dagger.
Actually, there was a couple of daggers. There was like an empty bowl.
A candle.
There was a feather.
Water.
That's what I noticed a feather, and I'm thinking, who keeps a feather in their basement? And that's what made me go over to it.
What's the significance of these things?
They could be ritual too. Yeah.
Right. That's what we asked him too, because that's what it looked like.
And we know that he's conducted seances down there, according to the interview with him, and it's just not a good thing to do.
What was his explanation for the table being there?
A Halloween prop.
Although the general assumption is that these props were planted by the owner for the specific purpose of entertainment or to garner attention, the group still had strong feelings that these items could have adverse effects on not only the haunting of the house, but on the general spiritual energy and safety of the house as a whole. After a tedious 8-hour investigation, the numerous data gathered by the team is condensed into a 9-page report containing not only the history of the Knox Mansion, but also a chronological summary of each physical or psychic event. In spite of their claim of capturing over 30 EVPs, multiple equipment failures, physical interactions, and psychic impressions, the official results of this investigation is inconclusive due to what ISIS feels is a lack of significant scientific evidence. But still, in spite of it all, their personal opinions say otherwise.
We didn't get any photographic evidence. We got absolutely nothing on video. We did have psychic experiences, and we believe we have EVPs, but you know, EVPs are debatable evidence too, so we have to go inconclusive. We can't say that it's haunted or it's not.
So physical evidence aside, psychically as a group, without having to prove anything, what is your feeling?
I believe it's haunted.
There was a lot of activity there. And a lot of it, even on the day of the site, you know, it's normal to wonder, like, gee, I get all these, like, feelings and images, and we just write them all down and worry about it later. But the last room we did, which was the library, some of my questions were answered, like, right away just on seeing pictures that corresponded to things that I picked up before I even had the whole history.
Which is why we had to do the library last.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the last room we did. But it's definitely, I mean, things that we were feeling were verified.
Yeah. They were definitely
psychically.
verified. So actually, we know the place is haunted. We just can't physically prove it because we didn't grab a ghost lasso it and get a picture.
If there were a certifiable stamp, we couldn't put it on there, but we could tell people to go hang out and they'll feel something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The tedious efforts and determination of investigation groups such as ISIS demonstrate an authentic basis for their continued research and are a testament to not only theirs, but the heartfelt belief of thousands of investigators worldwide that these events and their viewpoints of them are valid.
I think that if the public knew more, they wouldn't be as scared, and especially it could benefit children, because I've talked to quite a few that when they go to their parents push them off. And I think if the parents were just as knowledgeable, maybe they could help these kids that are scared. People have a very set mindset,
And I think the more research we do and the more information we put out, it becomes more of an understanding and not as much of a fear.
As I started spending time working with the group and realized just how much we touch other people's lives, my work with the group changed, and my whole reason for being there, it changed. It became much more rewarding than just learning about something that I liked.
The first reason to investigate is the reason that I like the most, because we're giving answers to people. We're helping people. I mean, that's the reason we do what we do. And that is what I like most about it. I like having the experience and seeing and hearing things that I haven't before, and maybe getting a little bit better each time and learning and growing with it. But helping people is our main reason, and that's what I enjoy the most.
Oh, I get such a joy helping people. I've had so many people thank me, even for emails answered. Kids will email me. They just want to know they're not crazy. They are seeing something or hearing something. They want somebody to believe in them. And just what you get back from them, the thanks you get, and them being able to sleep in their rooms or not sell their houses, that's the most reward anybody could get.
Part of our role is, you know, it's a parapsychologist, really. It's part of the role is helping people cope with these problems, and some of that is helping them cope with personal problems as well. And you find that it's very rewarding when you can help somebody embrace the value of their life more, because you were able to help them with this, overcome this problem that they're having, this issue that they're having in their life.
Few investigators will argue that there is a great personal benefit to be gained from this type of research. However, regardless of the personal rewards, there is still a significant question at hand, one that has yet to be answered to the satisfaction of the public. Where's the proof? The one piece of undisputable conclusive evidence that ghosts do exist.
I'm not sure if we'll ever have that, especially in today's age of video and audio manipulation. I'm not sure if people will really believe any evidence that's put forth to them unless they've seen it with their own eyes.
I know, today the paranormal investigators, I mean, they're going in, they're being very thorough. Documentation is a key factor for each and every one of us. Setting up the cameras in the different rooms, recording everything. I think that's extremely important. But the one thing that I always try to explain to everybody, just because you can't prove something scientifically does not mean there isn't something happening or they're not going through a haunting. A lot of times you go in and you're just not going to get those things documented.
You know, I go through these times where I believe in ghosts wholeheartedly. Something will happen to me on a weekend, and all that week I'm like, oh yeah, there's ghosts, there's ghosts. And then by the next weekend or a couple weekends after there, I'm like, well, maybe not. And then I'll come back down to the mansion, or we'll do an investigation or something, and it's like, oh yeah, there's ghosts. So it's like I go through these phases. It's tough. If you don't see it every day, then you start to rationalize everything that you witnessed or experienced in your head. And over the week, you can do a lot of rationalizing. And then also, you forget evidence too. You know, you forget that maybe this happened to you. So you're forgetting all about stuff that happened, and then just kind of reiterates every time you go to another place.
I've had my own experiences, nothing really major, but I've had my own experiences, and I believe in an afterlife. I have no problem believing that spirits are around us. Actually, in some cases, it's comforting.
As I said, I was a total skeptic before, and now I'm not a skeptic at all. I know there's something else out there that's not explainable as yet.
Please keep an open mind. Look beyond your own scope. Go outside your box, because you'd be very surprised what you will learn and what you will discover, because knowledge is a very powerful tool.
In spite of the countless hours of research, analysis, and investigations conducted by thousands of groups each year, that one piece of undisputable evidence still remains to be found. Will we ever find the answer? Will the world ever know what lies beyond the grave? Those are questions that we may never outlive, but one thing is for certain. In spite of our varying opinions and differing beliefs, we will all eventually know the truth.